first became associated with the club in 1949, they was still doing a lot of maintenance. The members on every hike would carry paint cans, paint brushes, clippers, and things of this nature, which would allow them to do light maintenance. Even on backpacking trips, they would do light maintenance. And some of us during the summer months would actually take off and with a crew and either a weekend or for several days and carry crosscut saws and axes and actually clear the trail where blowdowns and things like that had occurred. Around '68, when the first National Trails Act was passed. At that point, the Forest Service stepped in and took on all of the major maintenance, and this continued that way for about 10 years until 1978. In 1978, when the amendment to the Trails Act was passed, the Georgia Club stepped in along with all the other clubs and started doing regular maintenance themselves.
We normally talk about our partnership with the ATC and the Forest Service as being somewhat like a three-legged stool, that if you remove one of the legs, the stool falls over. Four-legged stool probably would hold up better, but we have a three-legged stool. I always think the National Park Service could be the fourth stool, but anyway, fourth leg. But that's kind of the way things work. It's a collaboration among the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the Georgia Appalachian Trail Club, and the Forest Service to really get everything done on the AT, whether it's planning relocations or just the continuing maintenance or some of the ancillary things we do, whether it's outreach or those kinds of things, are all really kind of done in conjunction with those other two partners. So
I see the relationship, the partnership between ATC and GATC and the Forest Service as a model for how we've really tried to operate in all of our programs. Appalachian Trail Conservancy, of course, is what I consider the umbrella organization that looks at the entire trail from Georgia to Maine and thinks about things holistically in that way, whereas, and of course the Forest Service does as well, but my focus is of course on the 300,000 acres here in Georgia, from Springer to the state line, if you will. And that's of course Georgia Appalachian Trail Club's focus. And so our forest, the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest, is engaged with Appalachian Trail Conservancy across Georgia, but also we partner with other forests up and down the trail to think about things regionally and holistically when we have issues like human-bear interaction. That's a perfect example where it actually, and we like to talk about Georgia's typically on the bleeding edge of issues on the Appalachian Trail, and what we mean by that is when there's tough problems between human beings and the trail, it usually starts in Georgia. But it's all about the partnership, and partnerships to me are about mutual benefit. I understand that who wants to partner with us if they're not getting anything out of it? So we try to respect the fact that trail community in particular is just an amazing group of people that have a passion for what they do and the trail system, and we try to utilize that and put that passion, direct that passion where we can, and do our best to partner.
The development and maintenance of the Bartram Trail has been a shared responsibility of the U.S. Forest Service and the Bartram Trail Association, with the assistance of the Nantahala Hiking Club and nearby colleges.
But those early years, the trail was being laid out by the Forest Service, and the Bartram Trail Society at the time was actually coordinating pretty closely with the Nantahala Hiking Club for where the trail would go through the Nantahalas. With the Georgia section, I'm not sure how it was laid out because I'm not as familiar with the history of the Georgia Bartram Trail. But I'm guessing that there was a big role in the Forest Service's kind of guidance for where that trail was going to go. It's interesting that that trail being built kind of coincided with the Chattooga River's Wild and River Scenic designation in '74. I mean, the efforts to build the Bartram Trail started in '77 and went on for years after that. You know, with these kind of amorphous completion dates, because it was just kind of being built section at a time, and a lot of it followed existing old trails. And Nantahala Hiking Club actually turned over some sections of trail that they had adopted. For example, like up Trimont Ridge, that was a section of trail that belonged to them, and they basically just turned it over to the Bartram Trail Society.
How does trail development occur?
It was all volunteer work, and there was Forest Service help at the time, so I'm sure there was a lot of paid Forest Service people on the ground like we don't have now. You know, but I know that there were Forest Service employees at the time that worked actively on building this trail.
Are there information kiosks at trailheads?
The Georgia section doesn't have that. You get a little of it at War Womandale, but I would like to see a whole lot more of it in Georgia.
Who performs trail maintenance on the Bartram Trail?
We also have maintainers that adopt sections. So we've been trying to develop that for the last several years, just getting people to adopt sections. But we also deal with it on a monthly, a workday basis. So we have two work days a month, public work days. So we have a second Saturday and a third Friday. And that's generally like where are the biggest problems right now.
Trail construction and maintenance was initially a task performed on the AT by the U.S. Forest Service. However, through the years, the Georgia Appalachian Trail Club, which was founded in 1930, took over some of these tasks. Over the years, the tasks of trail construction and maintenance has shifted between the Forest Service and trail maintaining clubs, with portions of the tasks being performed jointly. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy has helped organize the actions of the many volunteer groups for nearly 100 years. The AT was constructed in 15 years, following the crest of ridges resulting in steep sections. Many of these steep sections have been subject to severe erosion over time. In addition, roughly 50% of the AT in Georgia is in designated wilderness areas. Therefore, chainsaws or weed eaters cannot be used unless the Forest Service grants an exception. Before the computer age, trail distances were measured using a calibrated wheel.
Measuring wheel at that time was the front end of a bicycle. It had handlebars and it had a big wheel. But Henry, being an engineer, had calibrated each revolution of the wheel to mileage. And so that's how the trail was measured in those days.
Now, GPS provides a more precise means to measure trail distances. The early challenges to AT construction are explained by Whit Benson.
Roads and timbering have been a threat to the trail ever since its inception back in the early 30s. Arthur Woody, who was a district ranger up at Woody Gap, ran Forest Service 42 down the ridge between Gooch Gap and Big Stamp Gap on over to Doublehead Gap, and pretty well obliterated the trail most of the way. Some of the early members claim that he did this just out of spite for the Trail Club because he didn't like the idea of people from the Trail Club coming up there and telling him what to do. But anyway, that road and the road into Low Gap and around Horse Trough Mountain over to Chattahoochee Gap was another road that pretty well obliterated part of the trail. We finally got them to take that off the system back in the late 70s so that it's no longer considered to be a system road.
It really is an asset from our perspective and hopefully the public's perspective that we're able to have the overwhelming majority of the Appalachian Trail and the Benton MacKay Trail on public lands. It's just, we know that in perpetuity it's going to stay protected.
Several challenges to the original location of the southern terminus of the AT on Mount Oglethorpe led to its relocation to Springer Mountain in 1958.
The original southern terminus of the trail was at Mount Oglethorpe off Highway 136. If you go up to sort of the crest there and you turn on Monument Road and go down to it, and there's There's a place down there now. It's actually it's public park there. Eagles Rest, I believe it's called. I've been there, but my visit was preceded that. And so just a little ways north of the monument there, at Sassafras Mountain was the first shelter there. There wasn't really a shelter right at Oglethorpe. It was about 3 miles north there, and it was co-located with a fire tower at Sassafras Mountain. And Sassafras is right there on Monument Road.
Even after Springer Mountain was established as the southern terminus of the AT, some trail guides still listed Mount Oglethorpe as the starting point, causing some confusion among hikers.
After I got interested in the trail, I had no experience. On my first trip in 1970 on that trail, I went to its southern terminus, which was shown on my atlas as Mount Oglethorpe. And I was absolutely, when I finally found that rutted road up there, muddy, and the marker up at the top, the big pylon had been hit by lightning, split, and there was garbage everywhere. I was disgusted that the world famous Appalachian Trail was ending in a garbage dump.
The AT's original route has been subject to many relocations for a variety of reasons.
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't almost 50% of this trail is different from what it was originally, and a huge chunk of it is certainly different from what I knew originally just over 50 years ago.
If there's a need for relocating a section of trail for whatever reason, usually because erosion has made it so difficult to maintain that somebody has made the decision that no matter what we do with this section, we're not really going to be able to improve it or make it sustainable. So our best option is to just relocate it. Those relocations are planned about 5 years in advance.
Yeah, the general route is the same. I can't assure you that it is, step by step. It's the same, because the trail surprisingly has meandered around quite a bit, various places. Others, the trail is just relocated or is in close proximity. Some of them have pointless up and downs, PUDs. When I was district leader over from Hogpen to Unicoi, we did a couple of reloads over there because the trail from sheetrock top down to the bottom there went necessarily down a very steep slope. You couldn't maintain it practically. So to get a better, more scenic location, to eliminate real maintenance issues and or road conflicts.
One of the early challenges to the AT was the construction of Forest Service Road 42 just below Springer Mountain.
Forest Service 42, when it was constructed, they chose the easy way out. The Forest Service guy went in there with a bulldozer, and the trail was pretty well trimmed out, and he said, I won't even have to do much with the trees here. So it followed the trail, quite honestly, all the way from Springer parking lot, fundamentally, through there, and so just basically decimated the trail entirely over to the area of at least Cooper Gap. And so all of that has been relocated at one time or the other. So conflicts, and so the trail became an inappropriate location there.
Construction of Forest Service roads allowed for easier access for the public and also led to increased timber harvesting. Other threats to completed sections of the AT included the proposed extension of the Blue Ridge Parkway into Georgia and the construction of the Richard Russell Highway.
The Blue Ridge Parkway was going to drop down below Rosman, North Carolina. It was going to go through Panthertown Valley, generally go over to Cashiers, Highlands, that area, then into Georgia. And when it hit Georgia, it was going to displace the Appalachian Trail for much of the length. on its way over generally to Kennesaw Mountain where it would terminate. And so it was a fait accompli. So it looked like they wanted to get started on it, as I recall, pretty quick in the 70s. So George took on the construction management job of getting the new trail, the Appalachian Trail, built. And one segment of it would be the Duncan Ridge Trail because the AT was going to be obliterated.
But roads and timbering have continued to be a threat. The Richard Russell Parkway was put in when Congress authorized the funds before the Trail Club had a chance to react, and they put that over Hogpen Gap and Testantee Gap, and pretty well ruined the area for is the longest stretch of trail in Georgia that didn't have a road in it from Unicoi Gap to Neal's Gap at the time.
Some shelters and privies along the trail have been relocated, torn down, and rebuilt and re-roofed. Each of these trail and facility changes involved many hours of volunteer labor, and some construction required airlifting materials by helicopter or packing in supplies by mules.
We have a large number of shelters, privies, and other items like bridges on the trail, and basically the Structures Committee is in charge of repairing them and keeping them up to shape or doing any new construction.
Probably the first big project that, and it happened I think when I was trail supervisor, because I think I was organizing this. It was back in the mid-80s, and we moved the shelter from Cross Trails to Stover Creek. We actually worked with the Forest Service. They jacked it up, put it on a flatbed truck, and drove it in that old road to Stover Creek. And so that was a huge project that took a lot of coordination, and we actually moved that shelter. So that was a lot of fun. That was a challenge. And I wanted to learn to do roofing. So Marion McLean and a guy from the Forest Service, one of the tech guys from the Forest Service, taught me how to put roofing on a shelter. And I bought a roofing hammer, and I had a belt and everything, and I was so proud that I could do roofing.
I was also know that and partially involved with the shelter being moved at Gooch. The Gooch original shelter was right next to Forest Service Road 42. And a lot of people were using it that were not trail people. It was being trashed, it was not being taken care of by the individuals around it, and it was moved to the top of Gooch Mountain.
If you look back in history, the first shelter, I guess, the CCC built was the Rocky Knob Shelter. It was south of the Blue Mountain Shelter. Okay, it got tore down, and then there was another shelter got built there.
Blood Mountain Shelter was built up on top of Blood Mountain. The trail was being built at the time, and it was a stone structure with a shake roof. Well, over the problem with Blood Mountain is that there's a great big rock right next to the shelter, and individuals would jump from the rock over to the roof and were slowly destroying the roof. We repaired it as many times as possible. I was on some of the repair crews until finally I got to the point that it was really an unsafe roof. So the Forest Service, the ATC, GATC got together and decided to replace the roof. Now, one of the problems with replacing the roof is that all the original timbers were chestnut. And of course, chestnut being a endangered species, we couldn't replace it. So we had to end up using oak timbers to replace it rather than chestnut. And we had to use mules because Blood Mountain Shelter was in the wilderness, and we had to use mules to transport the materials up there because we couldn't use a helicopter anymore. At one time we were able to, but things have changed. They get a lot more stricter on the wilderness areas, and we were not able to use a helicopter.
Trail construction has changed over the years to protect the trail from erosion.
So when they first built the trail, basically they got on top of a high point and just went down the ridge. The only time you'd really come down to the bottom of anything was to cross a gap or a river or a major stream, but then it would be just right up the ridge on the other side. So it basically just ran along the ridge. That's called a fall line trail. Fall line trails are not good because you can't drain the water either side off of them unless your ridge is 2 feet wide, which never happens. So the water stays in the trail becomes a drainage ditch, and it erodes itself out, and the mitigation is to put check steps and check dams in, which only slows down the water, but it still doesn't take the water off the trail, so it's not a good idea. What we learned later is that side hill trails can be built. You tilt the tread out, called the outslope, and if you outslope a tread about 5 degrees or so, the water coming down the side of the hill hits the trail, and instead of getting in the trail and using it for a ditch, it goes straight across and drains off. So it's much more sustainable. Also, when you hit steep places on a fall line trail, you just go up whatever the steepness is. On a side hill trail, you can adjust that and even put in switchbacks to mitigate the climb. That's not to make it easier for hikers. We don't build trail or maintain trail to make it easy on hikers. Everything we do is to mitigate the water damage. A little over half of the Appalachian Trail in Georgia is in statutory wilderness. So the first 19 miles is not in wilderness, but then we start going in and out of wilderness areas. And statutory wilderness is land that's set aside by Congress with very strict rules about the use and what can be done there. So it affects our trail building too. In non-wilderness, when we're building new trail, we make it the tread 3 feet wide, and we clear a little further out on either side of it, about 6 feet. When we get to wilderness, the rule is 2 foot tread, and the reason for that is, and you don't clear it out as far. The reason for that is when you're in a statutory wilderness, it should be nature as nature is unaffected by man. The fact that we actually build a tread there actually violates the spirit of wilderness, but building a tread, and that's why they say, well, let's cut it down to 2 feet and at least make it less obtrusive than a 3 foot tread.
It's probably a year or two, and then I got the feel of it. I got to see what was going on, you know, get the water off the trail, keep the hiker on, Once I learned those two things, it made it a lot easier.
The construction of the Benton-MacKaye Trail benefited from the experience gained by the Georgia Appalachian Trail Club in trail construction and maintenance, and many of its members helped with trail construction and joined the newly formed Benton-MacKaye Trail Association. However, construction of this trail was not without its challenges.
One challenge was that the Forest Service had formed a policy that they wanted no long-distance trails going through wilderness areas. And this trail was going to go through the Cohuttas, because the Cohuttas is basically where Benton had run his trail down, and that's where the highest peaks were. I wanted to keep it on the highest peaks. I need a trail, a low elevation trail that runs the length of the park down below the AT. I want to divert some of the traffic off the AT, but particularly in the winter months where you get people going on the AT, they're getting up there, they're getting trapped in shelters, they're trying to bushwhack out, and they're getting lost, they're falling and breaking their legs, and we're having to mount winter rescues that are dangerous to get them out of a dangerous situation.
Since I'd done all this work as maintenance director and construction director subsequently for the Georgia Appalachian Trail Club, they wanted me to lay out the trail and be in charge of the construction over the months ahead. So over 9 years, we laid it out in Georgia. There were some delays and other things. And in 1989, we gathered at a cemetery shelter where the trail crosses at Dyer Gap and had a ribbon cutting and dedication with approximately 100 people there. I'm luckier than doctors. They don't usually get to correct their big mistakes. I do. Things that are too steep or too bad on the trail, I've been correcting layout ever since.
One of the things I'd like to say about the Benton MacKay Trail, it originally started out like a little family, and that family just grew. And we had some of the greatest work trips you ever had with the group of people. And not only do you learn how to create trails, you learn how to enjoy the creation of the trail with other people.
As with the other trails in Georgia, the most recent one, the Pinhoti Trail, is undergoing constant change as the trail is being constructed and updated. The completion of the Pinhoti allows a hiker to start in Alabama and hike to Maine, using the Pinhoti, Benton MacKay, and AT along the way.
Worked with the group that they had over there called the Alabama Trails Association. They were at the time building the link between the Talladega National Forest and the state line, which was sort of slow progress. If you think in terms of getting 1 mile of trail per year built, that's somewhat slow progress. Benton MacKay's map was a very broad map that only showed a general concept from, say, the Cohutta Mountain area to the Talladega Mountains in Alabama. He didn't put any constraints on that said that, you have to go to Lookout Mountain, or no, you have to go down to Kennesaw Mountain or anything like that. So we're pretty much in the corridor that he had conceived. The constraints in there have been, of course, like any trail, is what is the land development scheme in a particular area? How much public land do you have in an area? How much potential do you have for acquiring either easements or fee simple purchases on timberlands that are not developed? Up in the Cohuttas, you've got, at the northern terminus, you've got the South Fork Jacks River, which even outside of the wilderness is a very attractive river. Then you go down onto Mountain Town Creek. You follow that for nearly 4 miles, or at the branches of Mountain Town, which is very attractive. You've got small waterfalls, you've got the rhododendron growth, you've got everything that you expect in a cove of the Blue Ridge Mountains to be. You go over into the Bear Creek watershed, into the Barnes Creek watershed, then you get into the Rock Creek watershed, and you're following that for a very long way, over 10 miles. The Georgia group is not in the shelter business, plain and simple. Alabama, because of its national forest connections, they have a fairly impressive string of shelters. The Forest Service on Forest Service land has the primary duty. They have, under various agreements, various organizations. Sometimes they're user groups, sometimes they're the Georgia Pinhoti Trail Association. Sometimes it's their own volunteer organized group, like the Cohutta District Volunteers, or the Conasauga District Volunteers, which is a very strong group that the Forest Service has cultivated over the years. Their primary focus in their early years was to do Cohutta Wilderness, but they also do a good number of trails outside the wilderness, anywhere in the district, and that includes the Pinhoti. So you'll see a certain amount of maintenance that comes out of that. You'll see a certain amount of maintenance that comes out of individuals that are not affiliated with any organization. You got individuals that do a certain amount of work, but they are tied with one of the user groups. Then you've got the trail organization itself. And strangely enough, we get a certain amount of work out of some users that are affiliated with some of these adventure races. Now, this is something that's fairly foreign to both the Appalachian Trail and the Benton MacKaye.
As the song goes, what a wonderful world. We hope that you will hike at least part of one of the 4 major trails in North Georgia and experience the wonderful world that awaits you there. It will be an experience you will never forget.
Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through, just an old sweet song. Is Georgia on my mind? Georgia, Georgia, this song for you. It's as sweet and clear as moonlight through the pines. Yeah. Other arms reach out to me, and other eyes smile tenderly. But still in peaceful dreams I see the road leads back to you. Georgia, Georgia, no peace do I find like an old sweet song. It's Georgia.